Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's great to have this hearing. Thanks for calling it. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree?
All right, I just watched this exchange, and wow. This is one of those moments where you really see the curtain get pulled back on how Washington actually works. Because what Josh Hawley is doing here isn't just questioning a professor. He's exposing something much deeper, something a lot of Americans already suspect, that the rules seem to change depending on who's in power.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's great to have this hearing. Thanks for calling it. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and
well,
they
no,
have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait,
no.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions
What is the
are a problem.
principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential considerations.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
and why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are
injured.
No,
you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is this the same
I believe
thing?
in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle?
Power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit
A
strange?
very
You think this is
plausible
good for the rule of
explanation,
law?
Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
as a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator.
don't like
And the 1960s is where some scholars sort of locate the beginning
Can you
of this.
identify
But
one
others,
before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first. There were others in the
so
20s.
the Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are
Is
no
that
meaningful
blind?
constraints on the president is a very dangerous system
That's
of law.
not what
and
you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when
I
Joe
think
Biden was
every
president.
president
You
is
said that is
constrained
not what
and
you
must be.
said. You said it was
Absolutely.
a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
Supreme
when Joe
Court senator
Biden was
agreed-
president. Wait a minute.
agreed
wait a
9-0
minute.
with me on
you
that
also
case,
said
to
when
be
Joe
clear.
Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed.
Wait,
and the
what
combination of
case?
parties without standing and the single-judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
Issued in a case
we can
where
go
no
round
one
and
had
round on this.
standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as
function.
majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when I was arguing before a panel of judges and couldn't get my answer.
Now let's simplify what this is really about. The debate centers on something called nationwide injunctions. That's when a single federal judge makes a ruling that doesn't just affect the people in the case, but applies across the entire country. Think about that for a second. One judge, one courtroom, and suddenly their decision can stop a policy nationwide. That's a massive amount of power. And Hawley's main point is simple, but powerful. Where's the consistent principle? Because when Joe Biden was in office, critics, including this same professor, called these injunctions dangerous, undemocratic, even a travesty. But now, when those same legal tools are used against Donald Trump, suddenly they're acceptable. Even necessary? That's not a legal principle. That's politics. And let me say this clearly from a right-leaning, pro-Constitution perspective. The rule of law cannot survive if it depends on who you voted for. It just can't. Because the moment laws become flexible based on political preference, they stop being laws and start becoming weapons. That's the real danger here. Hawley keeps pressing for a principle, a clear, consistent legal standard that explains when nationwide injunctions are okay and when they're not. And the professor can't give one. Instead, what we get is an admission, basically saying, well, my view of the case probably affects how I see the remedy. That's honest, but it's also alarming, because judges and legal scholars aren't supposed to operate on what outcome I prefer. They're supposed to operate on neutral principles that apply equally to everyone. This isn't just about Trump. It's not just about Biden. It's about whether a handful of unelected judges can override national policy based on inconsistent standards. And here's where the concern really kicks in. If one side uses nationwide injunctions to block policies they don't like, the other side will do the exact same thing when they get power. And then what? You don't have a stable legal system anymore. You have a legal battlefield. Hawley also brings up something important that often gets ignored. For most of American history, nationwide injunctions like this didn't even exist, not in the way they're being used today. So the question isn't crazy. Is this a legitimate evolution of the law? Or is it a tool that's being stretched beyond its original purpose for political ends? Look, you don't have to agree with every position from conservatives to see the issue here. Ask yourself this. Would you be okay with a single judge blocking a policy you strongly support, nationwide, based on reasoning you think is flawed? If the answer is no, then you already understand the concern. At the end of the day, this comes down to consistency, fairness, and the survival of the system itself. Because if we keep going down this road, where legal standards shift depending on who's in the White House, then we're not operating under the Constitution anymore. We're operating under political convenience. And that's something every American, left, right, or center, should be worried about. Let me know what you think. Are nationwide injunctions a necessary check on power? Or have they become just another political tool? And more importantly, can a system survive if there's no consistent rulebook? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about it.